Ryan.
Today, we are learning basketball with Evin Gualberto, basketball coach at Dynamo. Freelance basketball writer, pro video scout. This guy loves film study as his YouTube channel with millions of views, breaking down plays and actions and players' favorite go-to moves will show you. Got to check it out on the YouTube channel with the same name. He also helps define terms with the Basketball Action Dictionary with Bowser to Bowser, who he also happens to co-host a podcast with, the Ready to Diagram. He also co-hosts the Step Through podcast, WNBA coverage with Sabrina Merchant, and bouncing around the league with Samson Folk. So, super excited to hop in with Evin today, hear his process, his film study, what got him into this, and, most importantly, how you doing today, Evin?
I'm doing well. Wasn't expecting that expansive, but very kind intro. For fans of the pod, it is worth noting that Sabrina Merchant is a little too busy now to be doing the step through, because she's doing bigger and better things. But and Samson obviously very busy. Sometimes work with the great Caitlin Cooper with Pacers coverage, but also as a beat writer of the Raptors. They're generally too busy. And Bowser to Bowser, like the genius behind the Basketball Action Dictionary. Like when I say I'm helping, he runs some ideas by me and we talk terminology back and forth. But that's about it. So I am just the sounding board with whom these very, very good, smart basketball people bounce ideas off. But that's all it is.
Hey, he's too modest over here. He's there's a reason they're talking with you. You're right there with them with basketball minds, and shout out to all of them. They all do amazing work. I want to. They've all had a shout out on this podcast once before, so people definitely recognize the hard work they do, and they appreciate you taking the time to hop in and talk some hoops about what you do. So first off, you had some basketball tryouts today. How'd that go? You over at the Matha?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't. As the tryout process is, I'm not really gonna talk too much about it. But I mean, this is my gosh. I started coaching when I was about 20 years old, coaching high school at 20 years old. This is my 14th year coaching high school basketball. So, I am young, relatively speaking, right? Old if we're talking about league standards, but still young. But I've coached for a while. I coached multiple teams in the season, do double duty, triple duty sometimes in programs. So, I just everything I do stems from a general love of basketball, and that's kind of why I really appreciate one, the idea behind this podcast is learning basketball, because there is, when I first started coaching, there was so much gatekeeping, and it was very frustrating to me as a young coach trying to get into the business, trying to just learn generally. So that's why if you've ever sent me a DM or a YouTube comment, I hope I get to the YouTube comments generally, but DMs I'm generally very good at getting to, is I'm here to help grow the game in as much as I can. So sharing ideas, concepts, making sure that as many people have as many resources as they want in terms of growing within the game. That's what I'm generally here for. So.
Hey, well, we definitely appreciate your perspective, and exactly, you're on the right podcast to give all the tips you can. That's what we're for. Just try to make it real fun and entertaining, and still come away learning something new, maybe you didn't think about before, or different perspective, or figure out a new advantage that someone could apply on the court, whether it be a coach, a player, a front office guy, an analyst, whatever it may be. So that's what we're here for. So more generally, how were you able to grow your passion of basketball into something of a full-time career for yourself?
Well, I mean, basketball coaches would tell you that if you were sort of able to make it a full-time thing, you definitely should, right? But generally, high school coaches aren't able to have this be their only thing. I am lucky enough that I have been afforded opportunities and openings where I'm able to make enough money from doing breakdowns or clips or writing for like freelance writing, that like I can make the ends meet enough that I get to coach. Because for me, I was putting out video content for the longest time just because I could, and then it sort of supplemented my coaching. And so I always say like I'll coach, if anybody wants to hire me to be like elsewhere, like ignore this part, but like I'll coach for free, right? And then I got to figure everything else out to make sure I can support that coaching habit, right? So, you know, I just as a player, talking about the video stuff on YouTube, I really loved seeing like little highlights here and there of players and then studying those highlights and then breaking down every single move. And then it's like, oh, okay, why doesn't anybody, and this was back in like 2013, 2014, why doesn't anybody have like progressions of like a move, right? And so I was like, well, if there's a need for it, why don't I just do it? So that's how I started the YouTube channel. Generally, the it was a sad day for me when Danny Green retired because his transition defense, right, was so singularly, it was so awesome and so fantastic that I got into many a debate of like, well, Dwayne Wade and LeBron James are the most devastating duo in transition maybe in the history of basketball, right? How is Danny Green in a 2-on-1 able to stop them? And I was telling people, this was, when I was still in college, that Danny Green has just terrific timing, and he happens to be a great shot blocker as well. Spectacular hands, anticipation through the roof. And they were like, no, Dwayne Wade and LeBron just messing up. Okay, before the Zach Lowe article came out, I was already working on that video. So Danny Green and this underrated aspect of his game, and grossly underappreciated aspect of his game, was the reason I started really doing video stuff. And then, I just started doing it for me and for a couple of my friends, uploading it to YouTube because it was different once upon a time. And, you could just upload it, send it, and nobody was really watching it, right? Except for the people you were sending it to. Then I started getting hits, views, so on. And then I was just like, okay, what else is underappreciated that I can highlight? And it's a joy for me to watch basketball, and I just continue to do that through the YouTube channel.
Right. I mean, at this point, the moment you said Danny Green, the word association in my head already brought up transition defense before you even segued into that. So, I mean, it's definitely something that's out with him, like basically it's synonymous, and can see how, you were ahead of the time, you called, and, that's just what he's known for. And it's definitely a cool concept to kind of explore on the YouTube channel. I'd say the most similar type of aspect I do mostly on the Magic, but sometimes I'll just catch a game that I really thought a player stood out and deserves kind of to be shouted out, like OG Anunoby's defense against Luka one game, back when he was on the Raptors. Like, he was showing he could really be an ace perimeter defender who could also score a little bit, dribble, the classic dribble, pass, and shoot skills, like showing a little bit of everything that you want in a good basketball player. And I, sometimes it's just worth giving a shout out, and whether it's 12 people that see it or a million clicks like some of your videos get, you hope the right people are appreciating it. And kind of similar with why I'll be putting out Magic kind of highlight mixes, or just shouting out certain players that really dominated the game, or just racking up all the winning plays that kind of all the role players make along with it, and just make it a fun little video with some music that my best friend produces and makes beats. So it's always nice to just kind of make something cool for it, because I know there's Magic fans out there, like, it's something I would want to see. So I'm sure there's some Magic fans out there that, look forward to it, or at least just want to experience something a little different and know that there's basketball people watching that game with them and appreciating it, and it's worth shouting it out. So can definitely relate on that end. And, speaking of the YouTube channel, we got a ton of videos here. I'm hoping to hit on basically all my favorite players that you've already made videos for. I mean, Steph Curry, Carmelo Anthony, Tracy McGrady, Manu Ginobili. We got some current like Franz, Wagner, and Herb Jones. I don't know if we'll hit every single one because these videos go for a while, but we definitely got to hit on some of them. So, what excites you most, about a player or kind of a move that really inspires you to make a video like that? Like, what do you just kind of see a trend and you're like, you know what? This guy is really good at that. He really might be the best offensive rebounder in the league. So I'm going to make a 20-minute clip of him just out muscling guys with feel and instincts and grabbing all these boards.
So I think I never set out to make a video like with a certain going for about 20 minutes or anything like that. I always start with, okay, I'm watching this. I'm starting to see a trend here. This is really cool. Okay, this specific thing. I think that's how I started like the Lefty Wonder series, which is highlighting a player's offhand or a righty wonder, I guess, if the player's left-handed. I just want to highlight an aspect of the game that I feel like not necessarily is underappreciated, but if a player's very good at it, I generally check around if there's not a YouTube video about it already. So, for instance, JJ Redick, once upon a time, like, yeah, he's a knockdown shooter, but his off-ball movement was always so beautiful to watch to me, right? If we're talking about like the guy you mentioned rebounding. One of my most recent videos was Josh Hart. The Josh Hart rebounding video stems from the fact that like as a I'm a significantly smaller guard than Josh Hart, and it's been a very long time since I was able to perform and get as many offensive rebounds like in a year, I guess, than Josh Hart does in a week. But is there a video about it? Okay, cool. Can I do more with it? Or if there's not a video, okay, I'm definitely gonna do it. Okay, these are the different ways he gets to. Um, what do I want to highlight here? I want to highlight the grab and goes. I want to highlight the tap backs or the Tyson Chandler esque tap outs. Right. The how many times does he ignite a break? How many times does he score himself from it? Are they worth individual videos? If not, I'll just put them together because just generally speaking, a lot of the videos that you'll see on my end started on the defensive end because largely there were a few, but defensive highlights to me are super exciting. Not just the blocks and the steals, which they're much easier to stat and watch, but as often as I can, if I do a defensive video, I'm highlighting like your active hands in the passing lane, drawing charges. Because if I'm a high school coach, I want to be talking about, hey, sacrifice your body, draw some charges, right? But also, there's more than just the steals and the blocks, because the stocks, maybe you gamble for those and it doesn't pay off. But staying connected, like Victor Oladipo, his defense is, yeah, it's a lot of stocks for sure, but a lot of it really came from how connected he was to the person he's marking, and how you just couldn't get rid of him. So hand in the passing lane, but the other hand is kind of in your chest. That's what a lot of the Victor Oladipo defense highlights are. So I generally just look, is there a need for this video? Because yeah, I think I've done a John Morant video. It's gotten to the point now where I don't necessarily know if I can't remember if I've done a video or not, but there are certain players I want to highlight certain things. And if there's not already a video, okay, I want to do it. But if there is a video, is it just highlights, or can players come to our coaches or trainers, all of whom have reached, like many different types of people have reached out to me in this regard of like, hey, I love using your film for film study because you break it down by the progression of the moves, right? So if we're talking about, well, I mean, you get what I'm saying with that, but it's just the Steph Curry video, which is like the number one video. It stemmed from the fact that it's like, just stop switching on the ball screens. just stop switching on the ball screens because it was exclusively meant to be a Steph MVP Steph gets these cross matches or to ball screen switch, or there's an action where there's no choice but to switch onto him. And it's like I went and looked back on it, and it's insanity. The description I put out there of like it's a step by step breakdown of I don't even know why I wrote this much about it in the description, but I was just like, I just don't understand how teams can switch. And obviously, it's much easier said than done nowadays, right? It's easier to say don't switch, but that's kind of where it came from. Of like, hey, if you're a coach watching or you're a player watching, like, just don't switch. Try not to switch. That type of thing. So I don't know if I answered any of your questions, but I talked for a while, so.
Hey, you're talking about Oladipo and Steph. Shout out Ola, man. I mean, I didn't even like realize there was a video on his defense, so that we're now hopping right into that because that was like to me as a Magic fan, that was the next D Wade like in Orlando for a little while. Like
Oh
he
yeah.
had that tenacity. He was easily our savior back then, and just an incredible downhill force. And like you said on defense at large, like I go back and forth on that. Like blocks and steals are somehow like underrated and overrated because like they get treated as the end all be all if someone racks up a lot of them, especially like maybe a defensive prospect that has a bunch of blocks, but you're not really seeing the process. You obviously like know the result of good defense is getting a stop or a forced turnover, which normally involves a block or a steal. But like you said, they can be reaches, they can be gambles, they can be out of position, leaving the guy behind him just to chase a block, and now you got a 2-on-1 wide open layup underneath, or somebody leaking out in a passing lane, gambling, and maybe 3 times they got the steal and 5 times they got beat because they jumped out in the passing lane. Versus what obviously with good timing, those can be positive defensive traits if they're not happening every single time. So, like you hit on, hand on the chest and a hand out in the passing lane helps kind of create that lockdown perimeter defense at point of attack, and also kind of have a deflective hand ready for those deflections. And that's why I always kind of result in like liking deflections just as a general stat almost just as much, or like right in the same realm, because it kind of racks up all the time someone gets their hand on the ball, whether or not they force the turnover or not. But um, like you said, I mean, sometimes they're just gambles and reaches, and we don't always know. So that's why I get back and forth of like, I think at the end of the day, they simplest way to describe or sum up someone who forces a lot of turnovers. So obviously they are a good metric for that, but we still can't necessarily overvalue them and just say that's the only way to measure good defense when there's players that a lot of people know are not the best defenders, but they gamble a lot and rack up a lot of steals on the perimeter or something like that, and it kind of like gets lost in the mud there. So impact stats aren't perfect yet when it comes to measuring defense. There's not a great way to just a one-all metric that says he's making winning plays by rotating to the right way to get a contest, and to obviously we can track individual things like loose balls recovered or charges taken, but they all kind of get lost in the mud. Like they're not all added up into one hustle stat impact metric quite yet. So, and while we're doing this for the audio listeners, you got to hop on the video because we're starting to see some Oladipo highlights right off the bat of just Orlando's own taking it to the rack. I can't get enough of this. I could watch Oladipo highlights all day. So, we're we're in the right place. But so you already kind of hit on Ola, so I'll move on to Steph a little bit. What Sorry, let me mute that. What kind of stands out to you? And this is early Steph. This is him jumping onto the scene during the MVP years early on. And you already touched on it, like, just don't switch, and it's easier said than done. But, this is the epitome of a pull-up point guard that can light it up from deep. If you're sending two, he's going to hit the short roller. If you go under the screen, he's pulling up. If you try to switch, he's going to kill the big. Like, this is what defense can you do to guard Steph Curry? Do you have the secret?
Yeah, I definitely have the secret, and that's why, no, but so what was fun about this video is, yeah, obviously, like looking back on it, I have tons of videos of players who've won MVP, but the reason I think this endures and it continues to rack up views, right? It's not like 8 years ago now. I'm looking at the screen when this was posted. This was immediately like one of the biggest videos. It's because Steph is a, relatively speaking, with regard to league average, right? A shorter player, and there's nothing he does that's insanely athletic to the degree well, I mean, his body control, his deceleration, all of that stuff, the conventional definition of athleticism. And, if people are listening to this now, you'll look back and say like, well, yeah, Steph was always like generational. But if you just watch it, the one of the things I wanted to highlight was how in attack mode he always is, right? So facetiously, like this says don't switch. It's not that the bigs are intentionally switching all the time, right? So as if you're watching it, if you're watching the video on here, it's that it's either a grab and go or an outlet where he's attacking basically not necessarily 1-on-5, but the defense has the numerical advantage, but the closest player to the ball just happens to be a big. Okay, well, it's Dance Dance Revolution. Unless you're sending two to the ball, and then he's a great decision maker and continues to be still. It's like there's nothing you can do about it. But it's this idea that I wanted to highlight something Steph did without just being like, oh yeah, he's a terrific scorer. Okay, well, I was able to specify it in a way of like, if there is a big guarding him, like let's have a whole highlight tape of him on bigs or him forcing the switch onto the big, right? And then you go from there. So it's not as easy as I make things difficult on myself. I don't really know why, but it's not as easy as like, okay, these are all of Steph's scoring, and I do have general scoring videos, but I like to try and sort of break it down by move or type. And so if you watch the beginning of this video, I think it's the move that he uses early is the fake pickup, right? So it goes from fake pickup to I can't remember. This is so long ago now. But as I was making this, or like it's a pullback, and then you go from the progressions of like maybe a ball screen, and then maybe a fake pickup into a ball screen, and then maybe a fake pickup into a drive to the basket, and so on and so forth. But the point is always, if you watch it all the way through, you see 7 different things that maybe I can incorporate into my game. Or, okay, well, I'll never be Steph, but if I can take this small piece, cool, because I watched him do it 6, 7 times in a row. And that's what I always wanted to do as a player. And I know that as a coach, I'm just like, hey, watch this clip. Okay, well, when you get the big switched onto you, I'm not saying you're pulling from 30 feet with a 7-footer, arms out and like in full contest. But if you watch him bump the hip, pull it back, the big has no choice then but to jump out if you have a convincing enough, fake pickup. Or, when he hits the Smitty move, it's like, yeah, he wants to get into his right hand pound dribble into his step back. And as soon as he does that, well, the defense is, well, they were cooked anyway, but the defense has nothing they can do at all. Right. So it's like when I do this, it's, well, this was fun to make. This was fun to watch. I hope people enjoy watching it. But also, if this can help one player be just a little bit better, I think that's my whole goal.
Hey, that's an honorable reason to whip it up, and that kind of video editing is appreciated by someone like me who thinks I'm putting up all these plays that are very similar or like a progression of like here's the time where he went left, here's the time where he faked the left, ignored the screen and went right, here's the time where he built off that three times later with the one fake left, fake right, and then he rescreened to the left, and it's like a progression of plays, and you always wonder if the viewer catches on to that or if they're just kind of enjoying the ride. But I definitely can appreciate that, and even the sense that exactly, not everyone is going to sit there and think I can be Steph Curry, but you might see one move and be like, I kind of have half of that in my bag. Maybe I can just add a couple more steps to that. Like, it's silly to say, but like he hit this like not game winner, a buzzer beater against the Celtics, where he kind of like lulled the defender to sleep as he walked up the court, and then right as his foot's past the perimeter at the top of the key, he goes behind the back to his right on a step back to the right pull up three. And that wasn't something I've ever even like really thought of or maybe seen before. So I'm out at the park now, just practicing it, just trying it, just to see if I could do it. And you make it a few times, it's like, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. Sure, there's players that actually are working on their game, seeing the same type of thing. Where that's why a lot of people will credit Steph for changing the game and impacting the game to the point where coaches now want you to pull up and be aggressive from deep if that's in your bag. Where they want you to stretch the floor as a almost every guard slowly becomes a combo guard in some capacity, just having to score, create, shoot, and pass all in one. And a lot of that comes back to Steph. So I'm sure the players out here definitely appreciate it. And I thought we might hop around while we got all these videos going. Maybe hop right on to Carmelo Anthony and what you think kind of makes him special as a post up threat. I would say, like, obviously there's great post up players of all time going back. Jordan on I credit Melo for the baseline back down fadeaway move. It's like one of my favorite shots. I think it's one of the toughest shots anyone can hit, where you're backing down your guy on the post up. Maybe you throw a little shimmy fake right shoulder and then you fade to the baseline, fall out of bounds. I think it's just like the ultimate kill shot type of shot. Paulo will use it as that type of kill shot nowadays for the Magic. But you can go back and see, Hakeem Olajuwon or Michael Jordan hitting these type of just incredibly tough, skilled shots. So, obviously Melo brings everything as a scorer to the table. A ton of players, like even Draymond Green, has said he's the toughest matchup he's ever had because of that combination of just brute strength, but with quick speed and explosiveness, and then the tough shot making at that level. And there's a reason he takes long to get to his spot, because he's confident he's going to make it once he gets there. So, what really stood out to you when you were making the Carmelo video to kind of show what makes him a special post up scorer?
So as a basketball coach, I've taught every player I've coached. No, well, not every player, but as often as I can when we're doing skill work. I do believe that, and it's a mindset that I think I heard a Hakeem quote once upon a time, and I watched Jordan and Hakeem as a child of the '90s. Well, I say a child of the '90s. I was born in 1990. Therefore, I watched a lot of them, but I wasn't necessarily old enough to like fully process it. So when going back, all the DVDs and VHSs, for those of you that are familiar, a lot of that is you watch a post player, and Hakeem said this, going back to what I was saying, is you take, or Steve Francis also said it, where the post footwork can also be applied to the perimeter. So as often as I can as a basketball coach, like doing skill work, it's like I'll take a guard into the post, not because I want them to be this exceptional post player, but because footwork translates to every aspect of the game, right? And so the other thing about this is, like, you'll see tons of post up videos for me, because it's one of the ways like I like to highlight footwork especially. And that's an underrated aspect of Melo's game in that regard. It's not something I chose to highlight with the play title, but like if you watch all of these clips, it's like that drop step is money. When he does the jab rip, and you can see it with all the clips um coming out nowadays of him with his son, is or that have been coming out with his son, like, from when he was like very young to now that he's in high school. It's that jab rip work, the footwork is so elite because he's selling the move, he's selling the move, he's selling the move. And if you don't step in reaction to that, it's a blow by. And he's so strong and so fast that once he gets his shoulders by you, you're not getting back in front, right? So, and if you take that away, he just so happens to have this silky smooth shot. So it's a number of things when he puts all of his weight on you, and then he goes turn around, fade away to the baseline. That's kind of the shot you
Mm.
have to live with, but he's so good at it. If we're talking about the one dribble sort of, I mean, MJ did it, Hakeem did it, Dirk did it, but people now know it as the Dirk fade, right? So, and then he had every move and counter move in the bag in the post. Talking, so when you add that to his size, his strength, his quickness, you take one thing away, and it's just there's answer on answer on answer. And that's ultimately like what I want people to remember Melo as with regard to like his post ups, is like, yeah, sometimes he'll Barkley it down and like dribble, dribble, dribble back down. But you take away the middle, he's going baseline. You take away the baseline, he's going middle. You send two to the ball, chances are like it's a quick shot, it's a quick pass fake, and then he's still able to fade away and hit over two. And also like what was he, like 6'10", right? At the end of the day. And he's got the patience, the poise, the footwork to shot fake, pass fake, step through, reverse pivot, pump fake, step through, and it's just you watch it, and I'm still in awe continuing to watch it. It's counters, it's move, counter move, move, counter move, move, counter move. And then when you take that stuff away, he still has an answer. And that was one of my favorite things. And then let's say you deny him in the post. He'll spin off of you a lot like Zion. I had a video, I don't know how old it is at this point, but the Zion where he it's a post up seal, and then the guy goes to front, or he just spins off of you to get a lob from. Yeah, it was back when Lonzo was his teammate, right? The spin off into a lob is so money. And you're talking about, well, Melo, I saw Melo do that first. Obviously, people did it before Melo as well, but it's just, that's my main thing with these videos is always like, hey, what can I show? And then when I show it, how well can I show it? And the best example of that is I did a Tim Duncan video um, of his progressions from the left side post up into a face up, to the point that, and it was all just like two moves. It was really two moves. But the infuriating thing about the comments of people who don't really know, who Tim Duncan is, and I try generally not to let comments bother me, but it's just like, oh, he had no left hand. Which is like, well, he wasn't called the big fundamental because, he had no left hand. It just so happens that the progression of plays I showed was move, counter move, and if you take that away, he can go back this way. And that was all it was meant to be. It was supposed to be like move, counter move, and then the counter to that move. But people took it as like this was his whole bag, so to speak, right? So, that's the downside of progressions too. If it's so good that you only show a player going to his right hand, it's like, okay, well, I guess that's all he can do.
Right. I mean, some ignorant commenters there just ignoring how impactful Tim Duncan, the big fundamental, as you said, were. And yeah, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If he can get to the shot on the first try, when you said Tim Duncan highlight video, I'm imagining just, I don't know, 10 minutes of just hitting the top right of the square as a little bank shot. just right there, and it's not your traditional highlight, but it's effective, and like he's one of the all-time greats because he was an incredible defender who could also just hit his handful of shots every time down, and you only need so many counters when you're that good at it. And going back to Kareem with the hook shot, I mean, if just I imagine his highlight tape looks a lot like a lot of hook shots because they just all go in. So what else would he be up to,
Right.
And that the spinning front idea instantly made me think of Dwight Howard and Jameer Nelson and Hito Turkoglu hitting him on the lob, because that was like his go-to move when teams were tired of him getting a post up or pick and roll. They would try to front him, and he'd be out there like pretending, calling for the ball, and then just spin and throw it down. It was one of the main highlights that he had in his bag, especially in the half court. And the Dwight made that his go-to move, and then yeah, even on Hakeem too. I was able to talk to Miran Fader earlier on the podcast with her book "Dream: The Life and Legacy of Hakeem Olajuwon," and the footwork is a big theme of it. I mean, he played all these different sports growing up to help develop him as an athlete before he became a basketball player late in his teenage years. He almost went pro as a handball player, and he played a lot of soccer over there. And so he's developing all this different footwork, all these different pivots and fake outs. And, he met some coaches along the line, and he kind of realized how that footwork and faking out your defender is an art in itself. Like, he considered himself like a creative artist in that sense, where like he's going to work on the block, and his whole goal is to pump you out of your shoes 3 different counter moves so he can get the shot that he's looking for. And then, kind of like Melo, he's skilled enough to still hit that fadeaway over you if all else fails. And we can't appreciate all these guys, especially Carmelo. Back to the video, yeah, the footwork was just next level, and you can't really say enough about what he was able to do. I think he's one of the most versatile, unstoppable scorers to ever play, even if he never necessarily got over the hump as a team and all that, because there's just only so much you can actually do with him. Like you said, he just has a counter for everything. Like, he's probably doing 10 jab steps just to see if you move your front foot as he's doing them, so he can decide, okay, he's not moving that, I'm going left on the next one, or he's not moving, or he is moving it, I'm going to stay right here and hit the fade, or it's just enough for me to stutter rip right through for the jam. So you can't appreciate Carmelo's versatility enough. And speaking of versatility and footwork, we got Tracy McGrady, the one and only T-Mac. Man, we're just hitting all my favorites today. I'm just in heaven right now watching these highlight tapes. All some of my favorite players, and we got to get him in a Magic jersey here, but that's all right. We back, hit the fade, hit the step back.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not sure there
It
are
might be
very
Houston on
many.
this one.
Yeah, I think it's all Houston, and
It's okay.
one
I'll
of the
allow it this
biggest,
time.
yeah. One of the, big oh, there, okay, we
Yeah,
got a couple
we
of
got
Magic
one.
things.
Now we're
I
talking.
am I am grossly limited by, like, what videos have been available, right? And this was at a time where, uh, I wasn't necessarily as good of a video editor, so, like, some of the highlights are kind of, in terms of the formatting, are all over the place, which is, like, if you know to look out for it, like, it will bother you. Like, watching it back right now, it does kinda bother me a little bit, like, how, it's kind of formatted, but
You got
I
the tape
am
though, you
yeah.
found it. I was gonna say, like, how do you find all this tape? And shout out to Dawkins. He's been online, on YouTube forever. I see some of his footage in here too. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I always wondered how some people were able to just find this film, let alone like clip it up. And with T Mac, I think of similar to Melo, just having all these different counters. He's another guy was unguardable to some players. Like Kobe once famously quoted saying, "He can do everything I can do, but like 4 inches taller,"
Yep.
or whatever that may be. And you know, oh man, we got the ads going now, but Um, but man, T Mac, he made basketball fun in Orlando. I know, Shaq and Penny obviously did too, but they were. I was probably like 3 or 4 years old, like kind of same as you, watching ball in the '90s, not really understanding, just kind of loving the hype of the stars and how big and powerful Shaq was back then. But T Mac was like our Kobe back then. Like he was just the impossible tough shot maker. You couldn't go around. Couldn't go Orlando without seeing his three stripe shoes somewhere. He was that big, that huge, and just seeing his fadeaways, his footwork, like you said, like just incredible soft touch, and he had that unblockable shot. Like he almost like it's like transcended up to Kevin Durant now, who's truly unblockable. But like just that the way he's able to fade away and get that shot release up with not only his height but the fade at that angle is just there's only so much you can do, and you got to appreciate T Mac. So what else? It says in the video, triple threat, post up series. Is there anything else specifically that really stood out to you about T Mac's scoring capabilities that made you want to shout him out?
So with T Mac was one of my favorite players, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much he could do. I remember those. Oh my goodness, what were they? The DVDs of like um NBA ankle breakers.
Mm.
If anybody remembers, right, the NBA ankle breaker series where T Mac gives a video of like I can, he literally says like I can give you any type of way. So how do you want it? And he's the only one who was 6'9" in those highlights. So the fact that he could really do it, there's so much burst to him, and like I realize it now as a basketball coach. T Mac has a two motion shot, right? So it was hard to emulate, and obviously being 6'9", it's not a thing where very many people can probably relate to it, in terms of T Mac's skill and ability, but his balance was pretty great for somebody who I think I read in an interview a couple of things here and there of like he didn't really work on his core. I think when he got with his one trainer, like he couldn't hold the plank for a minute, right? Which is crazy for like a pro athlete. Um, but there was just so much to his game that, like, similar with Melo and like Steph before him, and like that's the whole point of these videos. The footwork, the triple threat, and the post up series were a way for me to rationalize like, okay, I'm gonna exclude these highlights because they don't fall into this specific um you know box. So that's how I'm able to like narrow down some of my videos in terms of the decision making of like what can I do. Yeah, obviously I want to do a T-Max scoring video, but like everybody has a T-Max scoring video. Well, not everybody, but what can I do to sort of help players who want to study TMAC but don't necessarily have the ability time or maybe ability to clip from specific videos and say like, okay, well, I like this move, but I have to wait another 5 minutes into this 20-minute video to get the move again. Okay, well, let me just do a progression. And everything you're going to see here is, okay, is he facing up? Is he posting up? Is he in triple threat? Cool. Now watch the footwork. Now pay attention. Now watch the release point. Now watch his height. Watch every single thing he does. Throws his shoulder. Maybe he leans. Maybe it's a face up into a drop step, or like his the the behind the back when he's got his back to the back, when he's got his back to you on a post up, which is just, I mean, cruel to defenders, right? So generally for me, this is just a way for me to not drive myself crazy, because that's generally what I do with these videos is, okay, I have 700 clips of T-Mac doing stuff. Which ones make the video? Well, if I do post-ups, I can eliminate like a third of them. Okay, what else can I do? And so on. So when you see like the titles or like the boxes that these things fall under, it's just a way for me to narrow it down. And yeah, I mean that's my general hope is like, when you watch these things, it's like, okay, cool. Well, if I want to watch if I want to be entertained by watching T-Mac for like 2 hours, there are those highlight reels, and like obviously those are great. That's where I get some of these from, these clips. But if you just want to watch, hey, maybe let's focus on the footwork and the triple threat and the jab work. Let's do this. And so yeah, that's me trying to narrow it down, trying to make it easy for players who want to learn.
Yeah, especially players on the come up, players that aren't necessarily aware of a T-Mac because they just didn't watch the game growing up or didn't grow up in his era, or even going back farther to, older generations that obviously progress towards these games where, players want to learn from former players, especially when you're talking about like high level talents, but anyone that just wants to improve their moves and develop as a basketball player, like learn from the best, learn what works. And there's no way to reinvent the wheel, but every player kind of adds their own flair to everything, so you're able to kind of pick up a little bit of everything by watching multiple different players. And like you said, maybe you can kind of learn some of the footwork, some of the jab steps from a Melo or a T Mac or a Kobe by putting the tape on and just going to work with it. So hopping around to um, some driving forces and like the
Mm.
pick and roll assassin, pick and roll maestro, Manu Ginobili swatting bats for the Spurs out here. Manu is super underrated to me. Like I always thought he was the second best Spur. I never understood why he started or didn't start most of the time, other than like I get it. I guess Coach Pop wanted to like balance the second unit, and it was even more effective to bring in this, like, if Tony and Timmy work so well together, then you might as well like let loose Ginobili against the backups, where it's basically an all-star level player just beating up bench units all these years. Like, I get it from that perspective, from a team perspective, but it's almost wild to me. It's almost like if the Thunder with Durant, Westbrook, and Harden just like stuck with that motto. Like, if Harden was just a six man his entire career instead of being given the keys to have his own franchise, because I'm sure Ginobili could have put up bigger numbers, sort of like that, if given that opportunity and usage, his own offense to just run a pick and roll every single play down the floor. So it was always incredible how selfless he was in this role, and just kind of he embodies the Spurs mentality of ball movement, of looking for the open man. And obviously those like 2014 Spurs are considered like the pristine offense, where maybe it's inspired by a little bit of like EuroLeague back in the day with the passing and the looking for the open shot, and just no one man is above the team and passing up the good shot for the great shot. So you know Ginobili was just absolutely incredible. Probably still a little underrated. I saw he's still doing it, playing in like a charity game, like dunked the other day at whatever age in the mid 40s he's doing. So shout out to Manu, man. So what stood out to you with his pick and roll passing for the
So I mean, with Manu, I don't necessarily know how it works right now because if most of my videos are non well, they have ads on them, but I'm not making any money off of them. They're not monetized by me. But just something to keep in mind for the viewers if they're complaining about the ads, they're not mine. Um,
YouTube just messing with us, throwing these random ads as we're doing the videos. It's
yeah.
all good. The viewers will understand.
So Manu actually, I Manu and Steve Nash were two guys who I was just like, I'd like to think I played like them. Certainly with the type of reckless abandon they threw their bodies into um, the game with, right? And so injury upon injury for the both of them, and just playing through any type of ache, pain, blood, dislocation. They're just playing through it because they were so tough, and I really admired the two of them. But I used to have way more Manu videos. So there was a Manu video about like his scoring out of the pick and roll. There was a video about like his shot creation. Those are gone. Maybe OG fans of the channel still remember those videos, but they haven't been around in a very long time. Like this one is 10 years old. But I came out with so many Manu videos that just kept getting taken down for whatever reason.
Mm,
And I can't really understand the why. I can understand if I was trying to make money off of it, great. But it's just Manu is the type of player who, to me, you could watch Manu in any game against any opponent, any time of the year, and he would do something you might never see again in a basketball game. His, I keep talking about the footwork here, but the creativity, the flair. So right now, if you're watching it, he's nutmegging players on a pick and roll pass, right? There's just, and he was a big he did the Joe Ingles. I don't know if people know Joe Ingles for it now, but he would and sometimes it's called the Pinoy step, right? Because as he's driving, it's a fake lob or a fake pass in the midst of the drive or as he's gathering, and then he'd still end up finishing with a layup. And I did a video on that, or it was a part of my pick and roll scoring series for him, but that's now gone. It's just like he was such a fun passer, and I'm glad that if any of the videos had to get taken down, this was the one that stayed up, because when you think about Manu, like, you don't necessarily think about the passing, but he was such a phenomenal passer. And that's because every single part of his game was about deception. The eyes, the shoulder fake, the lean, which way he went. He was such a great scorer that, like, you had to sort of press up on him when he would put the ball on the floor. So when he rose up into a shot fake and then ended up whipping it inside, you could forgive the defenders in a way, because you want to take away the Manu 3. And yeah, so just you see Manu more now with the modern players, because the Euro step is there, the sort of herky jerky but incredibly fluid. Like, I know, obviously, if we're going to talk about the Magic, we're going to talk about Franz. He's one of those guys as well to me, and just he just so happens to be like, what, 6'9", 6'10". As a pick and roll operator, like, there are guys who are very herky jerky, stop and go, that are like, it's not fluid. It's more like, I don't really know what to do here. And then there are those athletes that are just so effortless. They glide, right? And so Manu and Franz, like, sort of fall into that category for me of, like, they're the perfect combination of, like, twitchy, 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 but smooth, right? And on any given possession, they can give you one, the other, or both.
right. I mean, they're just so patient. Like they can know exactly where they want to get to. They're not going to rush themselves. They're not going to like blow by you to get to the rim, but they can just maneuver their way around. I was going to mention obviously the Euro step, but like they can just maneuver into the paint. Then maybe they'll decelerate a little, get you going, looking like he's going to lay it up, and then right there they hit the wraparound pass. And there's just, like you said, deception is the name of the game for them. They're going one dribble at a time. Maybe mix up the angles is what I notice a lot, especially for Franz. But obviously Manu too. Man, his passes are just incredible as the videos go, and like his tough shot making is incredible. And then, like you said, like he might make a pass you wouldn't have even thought of in the entire history of the sport, and then he'll just like whip it out just in the middle of a game or the middle of a pick and roll, just because he can. Like his vision, his that effective flair, where it's not just throwing a random pass to make a highlight, but you know me too well. Franz is uploaded for the next spot, but yeah, I mean it's effective flair where like he's not showing off. He's not just trying to razzle and dazzle you. Like he's trying to beat you with a move that he knows is going to get point A to point B. And if he has to nutmeg you to do it, then that's just the cost of playing against Manu Ginobili. So definitely got to appreciate him. And one of the most skilled players, most underrated, maybe one of the most underused players, just given his career accolades where he ended up. But obviously, he got the championships to kind of back up his glory and for his resume that he's right there with anyone. And you know, there are a few offensive creators that can really compare to what Ginobili was able to do on a basketball court. And great segue here with Franz Wagner just ready to go right away. Something that stands out to me for Franz, and I wrote about it with Polarfall, Skyfall on Twitter a while back. Just his footwork, his gliding. What really stands out is like he will attack you on different angles that you don't normally see. Like he'll almost run like a high pick and roll, so he can get to like the far wing side, and then he wants to like basically diagonally drive across the paint. So that gives him the option to maybe spin back as he goes through the paint. Maybe he'll spin back for a little small hook shot, or there's the Dirk fade as he does that. And what's important with the Dirk fade for him is that he creates the advantage first by driving, getting the footwork planted, pump faking, and then taking the Dirk fade to kind of create a little for himself as he fades away. And his go-to move are these like gliding finger rolls that are somewhere between running hooks and like fall away finger rolls where he's not even really near the rim. Like he'll drive through the paint, get to the opposite block, and then throw up like a spinning little mini hook finger roll. And it's just a go-to. It's a swish or off the backboard like with ease for him. So, obviously the comparisons with Manu as well with the footwork and really the patience, like something that him and Fultz and, Chris Paul will do a lot is something called putting the defender in jail, or a hostage dribble is also another name for it, where they're going through the pick and roll set, and instead of bursting to the rim because they beat their man, they just go a complete stop and they put their man on the back of their hip. So now they've basically slowed down the game into a 2-on-1. Their defender is stuck behind them, and all that's left is the drop defender in front of them and the roll man. And it's all based on what the drop defender wants to do from there. If the drop defender comes out and tries to block Franz's shot out near the free throw line, he can hit the roll man for a quick lob or bounce pass or whatever, shuttle pass to the rim as he rolls hard. Or if the drop defender stays back, that's where it's time to maybe you'll see Chris Paul hit his famous like elbow fadeaway jumper or just a pull up jumper in that spot where he knows he's open, he knows he's money from there. He'll take that shot all day. And then also, if the drop defender kind of gets stuck in between the two as Franz is driving, that's when it's time for a little floater or a flob, which could be a floater or a lob based on that last second decision. But that patience is really stands out the most because, like some of these other drivers, they might not be the most traditionally athletic, jumping out of the gym, dunking down on top of you for posters. Even though Franz does have a few of those, they're not exploding every single time down. They're taking the strong screen, maneuvering around it with left to right footwork, some impressive glides, and then just staying patient in their decision making to take a shot that they know they can make or set up the roller if he's open. So, what else kind of stands out to you for Franz's footwork and scoring?
Well, the poise, right? The patience, as you mentioned, you did a great job of dissecting just about everything that he does, especially as a pick and roll operator. To me, the Veer finishes. So like, I've heard it applied differently with different terminology, but like finishing all the way to the outside. So like a sort of a sweeping layup or like a running scoop, not necessarily a running hook or anything like that, but it's more like a scoop where he's finishing to the outside. He uses his length well in getting to the outside there. also his off the dribble juice. When he can read the defender, and if there's a switch that he feels like he can take advantage of, or he can generate enough space to get into his step back, right? Like that's all great. And then it's counter after counter. So when he's as a right hand driver, when he gets to the baseline, he's either going to Barkley, right, which is to turn into to turn into a back down, or he'll get to about the baseline so he can get into his fall away game, right? So he knows when and how to get to certain spots and what to do when he gets to those spots, and then he can build off of that. So for me, he's just such a great mover, and it's really difficult to, I guess that's a common thing with, except for Manu and stuff, right? Of the three guys we've mentioned, well, not Vic also. But these are all dudes who are like 6'9", 6'10", and just masterful footwork. So when you take away the inside game and you, let's say, chase them off the line, their in between game is going to kill you, right? And yeah, and obviously as an international player, not to say that all international players like have great bags, but like the ambidexterity, the finishing, the skill, the ability to make the right pick and roll read almost every time, and like maybe it's not executed to the extent that it should be, but he's making the right reads. He's gaining a small advantage and turning it into a big advantage, and he has the strength and size to do so. But he also has the patience, right? The poise and the ability to, okay, you take this away, well, I'm turning over the inside shoulder, or I'm taking this turnaround jump shot so I can set up the turnaround shot fake step through later, right? Or he'll do the James Harden esque low rip. I don't know. Different people have different names for the moves. I mean, different people have different names for basketball generally, but the low rip versus the high rip, the windmill, the high step over, right, whatever you want to call it, is he has both of those and he knows when to properly deploy them. And he knows if he can just get his shoulder by you and the ball underneath you, he can go under your arm if he has to, or he can go up and over you, or all the way around you. But he uses his physicality and his frame, and you like takes advantage of any little seam he can find.
Yeah, and that pick and roll execution and decision making, especially for, it seems like a lot of European players that come over there is or come over here to the states to play professionally, is something that I think is pretty common. Like I wonder if it's like maybe they're just getting a higher volume of reps doing a lot of that pick and roll sets, especially with how early they're able to go pro over there. You know, Luca was playing pro at what, 13, 14 years old, something like that for like 4 years before he even got drafted. So, you know, that is a good note that, you know, obviously the the two styles, like American basketball, AAU culture versus like European basketball at large, kind of get stereotyped into this like kind of a negative context. But I think, you know, maybe it's just the reps of a team first basketball that, you know, European teams tend to like play is really what people are getting at, and that there might just be more reps, more usage, more opportunity to actually get all those decisions in where they've made the decision hundreds of times already. They've seen all these different defensive coverages to make those decisions in something of a more competitive team environment of teams trying to like compete for, you know, tournaments and different leagues over there. But you know, that's not to say it's not happening here as well. It just is definitely something that's noticeable in some prospects, that especially the high level ones, like even I want to say uh, I might get his name wrong here, but Igor Denham, I believe, just kind of started playing here for BYU not long ago, and he's only played 2 games so far. But you know, he's shown a lot of that decision making in only 2 quick games, like where he's just making the right decision over and over again as a pick and roll threat. He's hitting the pull up three when the guy goes under the screen and making them so far. He's able to get inside the paint and find the kick out, or touch a little lob pass to the roller with soft touch, or find the roller even before that. So it's something to at least think about as a positive. I think for when you see that seems to be a skill that stays relevant for especially European prospects.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not necessarily a this versus that, right? But there is great utility and great value in being able to spend 5 days a week on skill work as opposed to and then games the other 2 days. Let's say we're going on a 7 day workload schedule. The European model is more, practice focused versus game focused, whereas not necessarily it's not everything is the same, obviously, but with the sort of conventional AAU model, it's like you play more games than you play like 4 or 5 games in a weekend, right? And that's what's generally thought of as like AAU basketball. So if you're saying you're playing more games, are you practicing just as much? It's such a high workload on the players, and it's like you're more, to me, my understanding of it is you're more incentivized to continue to work on your weaknesses when you have the ability to make mistakes in practice, when there's no the low risk situations in practice, right? Because if you turn the ball over 30 times in practice, like, okay, well, that's not a great example, but there's no risk to it. Versus if you turn the ball over 30 times in a weekend of AU basketball, you're playing 4 games, your ranking or your stock goes down, right? And you're looked at, your value as a potential prospect in terms of these like rote rankings, it takes a hit. Whereas in AAU, it's like, okay, well, if you have a strength, let's keep going to that strength, because why work on your weaknesses when that's not going to help you move up, right? So I think that's my interpretation of that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of European players benefit from what's thought to be like, if we spend more time in practice, which I'm a basketball coach. Obviously, I love practice, right? And you want to make that as challenging as you can be, but you also know that like you want to give the answers to the test to the players before the test time comes. So when the problems present themselves, they already have, okay, well, I know how to do this and that, like you were saying. So, they know all the right reads because they've seen it and they've repped it out, as opposed to in AAU, where if the goal, not necessarily saying all AAU programs are like this, but like if the goal is just to win every game, like how much development are we really getting versus like if you have a 5 day, if you have 5 days of practice and you'll play twice versus if you only practice twice and you play 5 games, right?
Right, and we're obviously, before the haters come at us, a lot of the talent, obviously NBA talent, is rolling through AAU. We're not calling it out. We're just pointing out a little bit of a difference that seems to be noticeable from some European prospects that maybe get more practice time, like you said, maybe get more just time, reps, decision making reps on the actual pick and roll and working on weaknesses, where it becomes like second nature versus, maybe like you said, some of the talents here in America are more focused on using their strengths as strengths until it stops working. So, just something that seems like noticeable, and kind of has been stereotyped into a bigger like conversation of bad versus good. Like there's different ways of developing, obviously, but maybe they can both learn from each other a little bit in that sense, and get some more practice time, and make sure that the whole point of all these AAU games is to develop guys. That's the end goal, like not as much as it is to also get seen for what you're good at. So that's kind of where you hope prospects ends up. So jumping around to one more player here, little defense this time. Herb Jones, defensive dynamo, just like Oladipo to start, bookending it with some tough defenders. This guy was one of the best defenders for the Pelicans. You can switch on just about anybody. he might be hurt so far this season. I don't know if he's played much this season, but he is he's everywhere. Like his long arms, his instincts, the wingspan can seems like he could switch just about 1 through 5. He can rotate through schemes. So, what really stood out to you about Herb Jones' defense to make want to make this video?
Just general enjoyment, just fun. So Herb actually reminds me when I was watching Herb play defense, he reminded me so much of one of my favorite videos that, is also up there in terms of like a high amount of views was like prime Spurs Kawhi. Well, not necessarily
Mm.
prime Spurs Kawhi, but like a defensive player of the year for the first time Kawhi is just his length and anticipation, his patience. He's always jumping second. It doesn't really matter. And like just as we are talking about it, if you're watching it, there was a clip of Kawhi trying to get around Herb, and then um, Kawhi pulls up into a jump shot, and Herb just happens to strip him on the rise up. Um, he's just fun. He's just fun. So for this, like I don't necessarily know if there are haters per se, but I wanted to take the idea of like, oh yeah, well if you watch this, it's a whole bunch of stocks. Yeah, I don't care about that because Herb is so much fun to watch defensively, and maybe there's not a lot to learn from him because he's such a freak with his length, timing, athleticism, the quickness of his jump, all of that stuff. But that doesn't make it any less fun to watch. So if there are any players that can benefit from this video, terrific. But at the very least, you can watch this and be like, my goodness, how many times can a player block a 3-pointer or a jump shot in not as a help side defender, but in single coverage? You know, so that's part of why. Like take for example this. I paired it with I can't remember who the very first play was, but there was a sequence where he blocked SGA on a step back. He was in single coverage against. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so Jalen Green, very explosive, right? That he blocked his a perimeter shot, and then SGA, who is one of the craftiest scorers we have in the game, times it up where he completely engulfs an SGA floater or jump shot, and then he's got Giannis single coverage. He forces the ball loose, and then the Pelicans are out and running. And then I think and then we go Harden, Kawhi, Beal, Durant. I was just like, there's there. Oh, Jalen Brown as well. There's so much. This is just it's fun to me, right? And so at the end of the day, like, will people enjoy this video? Yes, that's my general hope. Will they learn a lot from it? I don't necessarily know. Herb is just he's just a pleasure to watch, and like for the first time in a while, like I watched a defender be able to do things on the perimeter where I was like, wow. Like I don't even care about the film study of this. I would just want to go, hey guys, isn't this super cool? So that's part of why.
Just appreciate this defense. I mean, on that point, like he's making blocking threes look easy, like his routine, and it's like one of the rarest things you can do. And in one of these next clips, he blocks a Kevin Durant three. Like this guy's supposed to be unblockable with the shot release. 3-pointers are supposed to be impossible to reach, and yet here he is closing out on Durant and blocking the 3-point shot.
Right.
Like it's just incredible to like see these instincts, the timing, the length, all come into one. It reminds me of peak Jonathan Isaac not too long ago, back before all these injuries as a Magic fan, where he was the guy that had some of this next Kawhi potential. He was leading the league in blocks and steals and deflections, right there with Anthony Davis for a couple months back in like 2020 before he got, or 2019, I guess, because I think he got hurt the first day of 2020 or something like that. And we would love to have that back, but Herb Jones is here, and he ain't leaving as long as he hopefully recovers here soon. And yeah, sometimes it's just nice to appreciate good defense. Like, there might not be a fundamental, but maybe someone can see like what are these instincts? What is he timing up? Like how is he able to get from point A to point B and use a second jump to block a shot on his way down after he's already left his feet the first time around. It's just incredible to see.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just fun, and that's one of the main things I wanted to get across is like, hey, watch Herb Jones,
Yeah,
enjoy this.
yeah. Defense can be fun too, everybody. So pay attention. So I thought we might hop around to some of your plays that you've been breaking down on Twitter this year. And before we hop in, want to start with kind of what do you tend to see to inspire you to be like, you know what, this deserves a breakdown. I'm really interested in what happened here. I don't see this too often. What makes you want to break down just a simple set that you see around the league?
Going back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this is I felt there was a lot of gatekeeping, or maybe not necessarily even gatekeeping. Maybe it's just as simple as like I wanted somebody to help me out in learning to watch basketball when I first started. And so like when I see a really cool play, or maybe it's not a really maybe okay, well every there are many very, very cool plays to me just as a basketball enjoyer and consumer. But when I see a set that I feel pops, then it's like, okay, why did it? And am I a good enough teacher of basketball to be able to explain it to somebody who my hope is if they come across the Twitter post, it's like, I've never seen anything like this before. What's with all the different labeling? Okay, well, can you find it in the basketball action dictionary? Well, if you can't, okay, I'll try to explain it. I'll explain it in pieces, but stacking the pieces on top of each other, right, is a way to, and being able to break it down is it's equal parts for me to try to keep it sharp in order to be able to explain it to somebody, but also it's just as a basketball enjoyer, like I said, it's like, hey, here's this cool thing. Like, do you want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it. Kind of like that. But also this season, my goal has been like to watch enough of every team. I certainly would never call myself an expert with regard to the NBA, and nor do I follow any team like exclusively. Um, I'll see if I can watch like the last 3 games they've had and like pick out a trend or maybe find a set. And it's like, okay, am I ever going to use this? If I can, should I post about it and then maybe I'll remember it on some end? But like my laptop is full of folders on folders on folders of plays and labels and breakdowns. And hey, this was cool. Maybe I could use this for this. So the idea is like as a coach, like, okay, well, I have this play in the back of my head and I have been able to break it down for like I don't know who's looking at this, but like I said, my hope is that you can understand it. And if you can't, maybe you'll be brave enough to reach out, right? Like like I thought I was once upon a time in reaching out to the many different coaches and basketball writers that I reached out to when I first got started. And if you want to have a conversation with me, let's talk about it and let's talk about why it works. And in explaining that to you, I become better in my process as a basketball teacher. But also, you have learned something from this set. So,
Yeah, especially with I feel like it's almost a memory trick as well. It just helps you understand it better, just being able to actually communicate what you've learned and what you processed it as. Maybe speaking it out, you might even, realize something new about it or realize especially going back into how you're going to coach and teach someone that play that you want to be able to explain it as clearly and succinctly as possible, especially the more complicated it gets, the more words you see attached to the end of the play, what might just throw somebody off at some point. So like I was able to talk about some like basic double drag, also called 77, with Ez on one of the other podcasts, And for those that aren't even sure what that is, it's basically a pick and roll with a second screener. And two screeners on one side of the ball. Normally, one guy rolls and one guy pops, and that's your double drag. It's simple enough that Anthony Black and the Magic's bench unit will run it almost all the time, like almost every time down the floor, especially to get rolling, just to kind of get a few people moving, a few basic reads going. But sometimes you see variations of it, and we caught one here on the Mavericks called 77 Spain Veer, and I was hoping you could kind of break down this one and maybe one or two other ones with 77 and double drag, and just kind of show how many variations can really go into it. So you could also kind of explain what veer is in general, because to the listener, as Spain normally implies you'll have a back screen for the roller, and that Spain screener will pop out himself later in the set. So, what's going on this play?
Yeah, well done. First of all, great job like breaking it down too. Is so a 77 or a 55 or a double drag or man, I had all these names for it on ready. It doesn't really matter what it is. As my very good friend who also does some Swish theory stuff, Joe Hulbert says, it's not about the name because the name is a parlor trick. The name is a way to help you chunk and remember. Understanding the why is more valuable. So like I know a bunch of very successful like high school teams, high school programs, AAU programs that like don't have the names, right? But they run all these key concepts. And like if you told a kid, "Hey, great veer action." They're like, I've had the conversation of like, "Oh, what's that?" It's like, "Oh, so when you set the ball screen and then the ball screener then goes to set a screen after, a screen away, normally a wide screen." It's like, "Oh yeah, so that's called a veer." So the names don't really matter, but I will try to explain it as best I can. The why matters. So for here, it's the Dallas Mavericks run a double drag with, I think that's PJ Washington is 25, right? And as the first screener, and Derek Lively is the second screener with Klay Thompson along the he's on the left side low block, right? So PJ Washington sets the first screen, and then the Spain action comes with Klay setting the back screen on PJ Washington's man. As Klay is setting this back screen, the second of the two ball screens happen where Luka gets the screen from Derek Lively. Now, PJ Washington is open for this, and the key to this action isn't just that they ran the double drag into Spain. It's the fact that they've emptied out that corner. So Kyrie Irving, who you can see if you're watching this in the far corner, right, is there. So the the tag responsibilities are shifted where you can't really leave Kyrie open in the corner. And a passer as great as Luka, he's gonna see, read the low man, and make that skip pass without you even realizing it's been thrown. So the key is the completely emptied outside. Klay is a great shooter, so you can't really leave him. So it's up to the defense to have to maneuver. The difficult part about both a double drag and Spain action is the defense has to communicate at a high level of what are we doing with the first screen, and then what are we doing with the second screen. Now, a 3-person ball screen action is difficult. A 4-person ball screen action, increasingly so, right? So we have Luka coming off the Lively screen, and then the veer action is when, like I said, a player, Lively in this case, just finished setting a ball screen, then immediately goes to set an away screen. And the away screen comes in the form of Klay Thompson. Now, for what it's worth, like I said, the name doesn't really matter, but for all intents and purposes, if you look for another play like this, sometimes you'll see an STS or a PTP at the end of it. An STS is just screen the screener. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Or pick the picker. That's the PTP part. So here, the veer is Clay set the back screen that makes him a screener, right? And now Lively is going to set him by virtue of his veer a screen. So he's screening the screener, and in that case, that's Clay. I didn't choose to mention it in this specific situation because the the opening comes from the Spain action, and then but the veer follows after. So it was worth noting because Clay gets the screen after. If that's not too much terminology, it's basically that they put the defense in a spot where they had to communicate at a high level, and the big key choice to be made here was: is DiVincenzo going to leave Clay in order to bump PJ Washington? And in choosing not to, that opened up the entire backside, and that's how they got the lob. And if Dante did choose to do that, then chances are Lively is going to screen the switch, and Clay is going to get open. So it's all about making the defense make decisions. That's all basketball is really. It's like how many decisions can you make the defense make, and how well can they execute after that. So
And I have to assume the more complicated that a set is and the defense isn't expecting it, it's almost like decision overload. Like you're trying to factor in, all right, where are the shooters on this play? Where are they going to end up? Because all of them kind of bring gravity on their own. So as shooters to the outside, so they become priorities. So obviously the personnel becomes a huge factor, and that's what makes this play, just cool to see and kind of it can be the cool part of the more complicated plays, I guess, where even Kyrie, who's not involved at all, like he has an impact on this play ending up the way it is. Like this entire side of the floor is open. There's no one over there to help. The guy that's supposed to help at the rim isn't just going to leave Kyrie Irving wide open in the corner, one of the best shooters available. And then on top of that, Klay Thompson is a knockdown catch and shoot sniper. So since he's the one setting the back screen off the first Spain and then popping out, he's now a priority too to stop. So like obviously Gafford and Lively are some play finishers as well. So this is the ultimate pick your poison, and it looks like the defense just kind of gets lost in the shuffle because they can beat you so many different ways. Let alone if Luka decides to attack or something like that. So it's really hard to help. Let alone actually just decide. Like if you're not perfectly in sync on who's switching what, not just after one screen but two screens and then a third screen, all in the same set, like you're just toast. You got to have incredible communication, and then sometimes you'll see, like back to Steph Curry. I talked about it with Charlie the other day. Like he ran one where the Celtics almost were prepared for a couple of on-ball screens in a row. Al Horford kind of hung back and just had the perimeter guys, Drew and Tatum, switch everything after they got screened a few times. But just that half second that Drew Holiday gets spun around trying to find the man he's trying to switch onto is all Steph needs to pull up for a three. So, you really have to be like on sync, in sync, on top of things with no half step to lose, or else someone at this level is going to beat you pretty easy. So, that's some of the exciting stuff with the 77. And we got one more 77 here with the Wizards. 77 post split stagger, where you're gonna have to break down what this Gaggle or Bilbao action is for me, because you lost me on that one. I think you mentioned maybe in a different tweet that Popovich might have named it that as well for the term. So walk us through this one, and how complicated some of these double drags can really become, and maybe everyone at this level obviously might be expecting a horn set or a double drag set where it's just two screens involved, and the only difference there is horns will have one screener on either side of the man you're attacking, while double drag will have two screeners set up on the same side to run them through both. So that's kind of maybe the first step of a lot of these actions that involve the more complicated pick and rolls. But then you start throwing a few more distractions, deceptions around everything, and you're just creating multiple advantages. So, what's going on this one?
Sure. So, like I said, it's not about the why. The post with Stagger, like Gaggle, Bilbao. I'll explain those in a second. But so double drag, right? If we're talking about a double drag, it's in this first one, the one at home. It's Kuzma and then Valanciunas setting the double ball screen, right? And it's to an emptied side, so that allows Kuzma to sort of half roll into a post up, and it's a high post up, right? So it's around the elbow area, and so that allows, I think that's Jordan Poole, to swing it to JV, who's not really a 3-point threat, right? So defenses will be happy to let him catch it out there. And then Kuzma seals into a post up because you want to kind of fight and take away the roll, especially on an emptied side. So Kuzma seals into a post up. It's a swing to Valanciunas post entry. So that's the double drag part. And then a post split, as I've been running at the high school level for like many years, because like the triangle was a big influence on me. And so, you take bits and pieces, and the Warriors, especially with Steve Kerr, have revitalized the post split action. Um, Especially when Steve came into the league. It's once there's a post entry, split action is whether you're talking about a high split zoom, like in Princeton, it's a 3-person action where the in front of the ball, it's a screen away, and then the decisions you make after that, right? So if you're just thinking about the conventional Warriors, it's Steph Curry enters the ball to Draymond Green, and then he goes to screen away for Buddy Hield. With Draymond as the in front of as the post up player, having received the ball, no, a little extended from the post, you have the choice of, okay, is Steph gonna slip out? I have to be on my P's and Q's. If Steph sets the screen, are we gonna switch with Buddy? Any which way you do it, like the player screening away, the player coming to the ball, and then the post up, there are numerous options out of that, and you can continue to build out reads. But that's just a basic post split. This particular post split has a second screen. So right there, number 24, Corey Kispert, JP is going to screen for Kispert along the lane line, right? Kispert is going to curl. So there's the stagger, right? It's a 2 screens, the stagger. So Valanciunas and Jordan Poole are screening for Kispert here. So Kispert will curl, and then Valanciunas is going to then screen for the first screener, Jordan Poole. And then in the first clip, Jordan gets wide open and he cans a 3. In the second one, something very similar happens, except they call a foul for the player holding Poole, right? But what you see here is, I believe that's Jaquez guarding Kispert, and then Hero guarding Poole, but they force a switch, and then that's where the foul occurs because the switch has been forced. And so you get into the situation where there are multiple different reads, and then sort of, we talked about optionality, right? There's option on option on option after that. And so the to answer your question, the Gaggle or the Bilbao, I've heard different people call it different things. It's just a Gaggle. I've seen Greg Popovich in a very old DVD of that going through old Spurs sets. That's just what he calls a double stagger, double screen away, whatever, and then the reads after that. So you can choose to twirl it, which is what the Wizards do here, or you can choose to have them both set the screen, and then the player comes flying across for a swing, and then wide open shot or whatever. So these are just fancy names for like a stagger or a split. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, but I'm just, that's where I get the term. And it's just an easy way to, especially if you use the Twitter search function, as I do for keywords, this is just a way for it to get it to pop up. So this was more me putting it there so I could find it later, as opposed to me trying to tell people it's important to learn these terms, right?
Right. And so just to be clear here with the video, if it was just a 77 pose stagger, maybe the Kispert would be running through both screens, but it's a split stagger because he runs through the first one, but then cuts through the paint and splits the two stagger screens by kind of attacking the paint. Is that correct?
Different schools of thought, right? In terms of thinking about it. So for some, and I don't want to get to it's you're what you're saying isn't wrong. I'm just saying there are different interpretations of it. So for some, and I use it this way, anytime there is a post entry like Valanciunas does here and the screen away, that's an automatic post split, right? So you don't need the stagger at this point because yeah, they're setting two screens. They're setting two screens away, and the ball is in the post. But if you just call this a regular post split, I don't think. Well, people that split hairs would split hairs, right? But you're not wrong in doing either. You're also not wrong in just saying a split stagger and not even involving the post if you don't think that's a low enough post up. But I name it this way because the Gordy Herbert of the German national team, and where Franz played, when they won the FIBA Basketball World Cup, that's what I heard it get called, and so that was my first time seeing it. Where they didn't run a double ball screen out of it, they ran a UCLA, where it's a so yeah, excuse me, Franz swung it to the wing and then got a screen at the elbow where he curled off of it from Isak Bonga, and that allowed him to get good post position. They threw it into the post, and then they did the same thing that happens here. So for me, that's why I named it this way, is because that's how I originally saw it get named. But again, I said it's all splitting here, so it doesn't really matter. You're not wrong, and I'm not sure I'm 100% right in this situation, but there's a lot of different ways to name it. So.
Hey, that's why I'm asking, just to help clear it up. That's how we learn. I'm not gonna get it on the first try either. And so at the heart of it, you kind of comment here as well that by having the big wing set the first screen and then posting them up and running something out of that is a Gaggle or a Bilbao on its own, and could also be referred to as any of these other names: the post split, the split stagger, the all those
Yeah,
combinations.
absolutely. So that's the nice thing is like so Joe Verre, who also does a great job of breaking stuff down. Like I think he calls it Gaggle. And then Bowser to Bowser will call it Bilbao, and I'll always until my dying days call it a post split. So they're all but if you watch the videos, they're all the same thing. And you're just talking about reads out of that. So it's not like it's the end of the world if you call it one thing or not the other, and if you omit this, omit that. We all have different names for it, and NBA coaches once upon a time would call it pick the picker or screen the screener or a double drag. Another name for it is pick, right? So it's it just depends on which school of thought you come from and what you're comfortable with. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, terminology is developing. Not everyone studies, learns at the same exact place from the same exact source, where it's not like there was a basketball action dictionary to teach everyone back in the day like there is now. So, some you got to call everything something. So whatever makes sense, and kind of like you mentioned before, shout out Joe with a parlor trick, just whatever can kind of be as simple and effective, especially the whole point being a coach to its players being able to quickly say on the sideline and get everyone in line with something they've practiced a million times, like this is the play, with one word to kind of sum it all up. So whatever that is, whatever hand motion it is, you'll see, like I think Joe Verre just tweeted out a clip of Steve Kerr just screaming like chin thumb to try to get his play out. And it's I'm sure a lot of it is just comes down to communication and just being as easy to understand as possible, especially with how loud arenas get, how far away people are. They got to be able to see you across the court, hear you across the court in less than 3 seconds because there's only 24 to actually run the thing. So they got to be as quick and effective. So appreciate you jumping on those or digging into those 77 double drag variations. And I thought we might hop around kind of like one more idea, I guess, is the skip pass or the skip concept, I should say, where you noted that Dan Hurley has run it, JJ Redick has run it, and the idea seems to be. I'm going to let you break it down for us here, but there's a couple different versions of it. I was going to see if the one with Anthony Davis, if I'm looking at the right one. So this is the one I've seen a few times where Anthony Davis is in the corner, and that's Austin Reeves runs into him for a quick handoff, and they have basically a 2-on-2 spread to themselves on that entire side of the court. It's a quick handoff. He gets the strong screen there, and now it's basically a 2-on-1. So they can just kind of run all the things we've talked about with like Franz earlier, where Reeves can pull up, Reeves can attack, Reeves can dump to AD can dump it back to Reeves. Either one of them can score. They're attacking a big defender, so the options are endless here. So, what exactly is the skip concept, and what's going on here? How are the Lakers able to use it? And it looks like a Ram Ghost skip is the name of this set.
Yeah, that one I think is the first play feature. That's why I specified. I mean, they're effectively different plays with the same concept, right? So I prefer calling it a concept rather than. I mean, you're not wrong in calling it a skip pass. That's all it is there. So just in terms of breaking it down, the skip concept, which Steve Kerr, Eric Spoelstra, many a EuroLeague team, Dan Hurley, of course, most famously, and now JJ Redick doing it, is the idea here is like you have this action where the Ram part of it is all the Ram is D'Angelo Russell is going to set a ball screen here for Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves will then, or excuse me, D'Angelo Russell will set a down screen or a screen wherever he is for Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves will then go set a ball screen. That's what makes it a Ram, right? All of that, just screening for a player who's going to then set a ball screen. Austin Reeves then ghosts out of it, right? So simply not setting a screen, but slipping out to the perimeter, right? So now we have a shifted defense by virtue of the Ram, where I can't remember if so the Suns did not switch this one, right? Bradley Beal stays connected to Austin Reeves. But the idea is a guard slip out causes confusion, and now Bradley Beal is switching onto LeBron, right? The ball handler in this situation. The skip goes to Jackson Hayes, who I've sometimes seen this referred to as a dead corner DHO, a dead corner dribble handoff, where he's skipping it. So now the player who I can't really see who this is, and I forget who it is, but the player chasing Austin Reeves is now a step and a half behind because of the switched ball screen and the ghost, right? So normally defenses are instructed to switch on contact. Because of the ghost here, that's kind of a hip check type of thing. Now you're forcing the switch, right? And so there's enough contact where the defender is now a step behind LeBron by skipping it from the strong side to the opposite side. A big lifting out of the corner. Jackson Hayes isn't really a corner threat, right? From three. This is a way to utilize a big in a position where you're doing like not necessarily a 4.5 out or spacing, but you get the big in there and the defense is a little sagged off anyway because you're not really, I don't care if Jackson Hayes is taking a corner three, but by LeBron skipping it to him and then he automatically flows into a dribble handoff for Austin Reeves, now you're talking about the player defending Austin Reeves is 2 steps behind. And so it's a 2-on-2 in the corner, but the ball handler defender is behind. And so now the ball handler defender is behind. the big defending or the big defending Jackson Hayes has to step up, and that means that all Jackson Hayes has to do is roll to the basket, and he gets a relatively easy finish, right? So that's part of the appeal of it. It is the defense almost always will load to the ball, especially with LeBron as the ball handler. As the defense loads, right, Ryan Dunn is still chasing Austin Reeves, but now the defense is all the way shifted. Quick skip, dribble handoff. Now he's getting downhill in a way that, it was thought to be more unconventional once upon a time.
Yeah, I can definitely see, especially how you can kind of just lose the defender and panic ensues. Like these are the rookie defenders that you were talking about. Ryan Dunn, number 0, is Austin Reeves' man, and I'll probably mess up his name, but the other rookie, Oso, is guarding the big man here. And so, they didn't switch that first one. So Bradley Beal's already kind of like chasing him. And then by slipping this screen with the ghost concept, he's like got no hope to actually catch up, it seems. So they just have to switch again because someone's got to stop LeBron from driving untouched to the hole. Like that's priority number 1. So now Reeves has a little bit of an advantage. And instead of giving him the ball right away, he can skip the ball all the way to the corner for the empty DHO thing. And now Reeves has that momentum. He still has a defender on his back. And he gets the ball on the handoff. So the Suns are just going to, I don't even know if it's a switch or just kind of trapping him again, where they're just going all out to the ball. Like you said, it's priority to stop the ball. No one is, once 2 are Reeves, no one is left on this DHO roller, and he's wide open for the lob.
Right. Yeah,
And
and then the back end of this play is sort of a weave action, right, which is a bunch of DHOs. So LeBron can get a nail, or he gets pushed out a little bit, but he gets a middle of the floor catch. What he's going to do here is he's going to turn around and then skip it to Anthony Davis, right? Again, we're switching from one side of the floor to the other. Well, he's sort of in the middle, so I don't necessarily know if I can say that. But it's an automatic. So now if you look at it, Devin Booker is a step behind. Anthony Davis hands it off. Yusuf Nurkic does the right thing here by being in drop on this pick and roll. So the straight line drive is sort of taken away from Austin Reeves. Devin Booker does a great job chasing, but he is a step behind. So it's a quick give and go. And then once, as a defender, right, you sort of relax as soon as the player gives up the ball, even for just a half second. That half second of relaxation means, and Anthony Davis is enough of a mid-range threat that Yusuf Nurkic has to like step to him. As Devin Booker relaxes in this situation, it's a quick give and go for Austin Reeves. And then, Kevin Durant, I think Rui Hachimura had just hit a corner 3 in this situation. Kevin Durant can't really help off immediately, and Austin Reeves gets as easy of a look as he's going to get, right? So it's because the defense has shifted, and you, like, whether or not you play this right, you're playing now with an advantage. And that's all it is.
Right, and it seems like, momentum is another big aspect here where, like you said, Booker does a good job cutting him off, but he takes that half second to kind of take a pause, catch his breath, or just not even notice that he's still got to be going to work. He tries to get on his outside shoulder for whatever reason, and he just gives up the baseline that he had just cut off, and now he reopens it back up, and Reeves notices, instincts, give and go, easy bucket for the Lakers right there. And it's another one where the momentum comes to play because Reeves is gaining momentum as he goes. He's kind of throwing Booker one way, throwing him back the other way, and then boom, he gets the opening. And once again, it becomes kind of like a 2-on-1 between the big and the point guard, or the whoever's got the ball here. And once he gets past Booker, he realizes Nurkic is up guarding that mid range, like you said, and no one's actually guarding the baseline. KD can't quite get there in time. Easy bucket. So that's a cool one too. I see the skip pass can basically be a skip concept, like you said. And the Ram Ghost is also an interesting way to kind of like have the screener who's slipping use that as a quick advantage, and instead of just rolling to the rim, where they're involved in a secondary action after that. So it's definitely a cool way to run around. And if you got time, I thought we could do one more skip play here with Kenny Atkinson and the Cavs running the skip concept for Evan Mobley, where you say the first one is a high ball screen into a skip keeper, a real beauty, and the second one is a delay zoom skip where he hands it off to Garland and DG finds him rolling. So we've got the plays here loaded up, and so what do you see here?
Sure. Well, the first one is really easy, right? So this is a more pronounced way to do it, where with the Lakers, what we saw with LeBron is he's in the middle of the floor, right? So the defense is loaded up, but if you're just skipping it to one side, it's not really that big of a thing, right? But here we go from the one side where it's side ball or a high ball screen, right? And Jonas Valanciunas isn't really playing Evan Mobley, even though he's a good corner threat. Evan Mobley is a guy you sort of live with him taking corner threes, right? So because the skip pass is sort of an unexpected thing, now Donovan Mitchell, like he's such a great offensive weapon that like you sort of take that away. And so by skipping it there, Valanciunas is a step behind. Donovan Mitchell is a monster, whether you play him for the shot or you play him for the drive, right? So all Evan Mobley has to do is a simple handoff fake, right? And now basically that's a keeper is pretty self-explanatory there. He keeps it and he's able to turn the corner because JV is a step behind. So Mobley, because of the skip and the gravity of Donovan, is boom, one quick ball fake, turns the corner. He's able to use his explosiveness, his agility. He gets right around him, and then he's able to throw it down. And the defense can't get there in time enough to help because, like I said, this was more pronounced that it went from one side of the floor to the other. And then
people always, I was going to comment that people always like they think gravity is like trying to make fun of Steph Curry's impact because of gravity, like it's some unknown thing, like you can't actually see. Like this is a visual example of what Donovan Mitchell's gravity is doing to this defense. Like the ball is just getting to this side of the floor. The big man guarding the ball and the guy guarding Donovan are focused on Donovan. They do not want him to get open for a three off a handoff. And Nurkic, was it Nurkic or Valanciunas? Just is not ready. He's going to double the ball and immediately loses step because maybe he's not in good positioning either and kind of falls off balance a little bit there too. But that's an example of shooting gravity to me, to where all Mobley has to do is fake a handoff and suddenly it becomes a 1-on-0 because the two defenders in this area are just nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too that Kenny Atkinson had just come from the Steve Kerr bench, right? And so the Warriors don't get enough credit for, all great coaches steal. So wherever Steve Kerr got it from, whether it was an assistant or him finding it overseas or a video coordinator finding it, it's a great concept. Kenny Atkinson is applying very many great things to the Cavs. And, if he's turning Evan Mobley into a Draymond Green type offensive hub, like only good things can happen from that. So the second one, I get a bunch of terminology here, but I never want people to be discouraged by terminology. Delay is simply, for me, it's a 5-out where when you swing the ball to the trailer is often the guy inbounding the ball, right? So you swing the ball to the trailer, and then they go into zoom action, Chicago, basically a down screen into a dribble handoff, and then the down screen into a dribble handoff turns into, similar with the Lakers, it's Evan Mobley coming out of the corner now. Incredibly quick and skilled pass here, where he sort of catches and laterals it to Darius Garland, like all in one motion. Now Garland is headed downhill, similar to the first skip that we saw where Jackson Hayes gets it on the roll. Evan Mobley gets it here because now there are two on the ball and there's a seam with which to throw it. Still a tough finish by Evan Mobley here with the hook, right? Sort of in traffic, but it happens because you run that zoom action on the one side, again occupying that one side, defense loads up, and now we're skipping it. So suddenly it's like, in theory the Lakers have practiced against this, but I mean, when it happens full speed like this, there's not a whole lot you can do.
And so you mentioned Chicago. So is one of these words a synonym for Chicago?
Yes. So zoom is just a catch-all of like a three-person action. For those that if it really matters to you about the terminology, a Miami action is like a dribble handoff followed by a ball screen, right? So in this situation, let's say a Miami would be, if I can't really make out who these players are because I recorded this, right? So I think that's Ty Jerome on the skip. And then that's Max Strus giving the handoff, right? So if Strus was first, okay, so the three players involved on the initial action are Isaac Okoro, Ty Jerome, and Max Strus, right? So Okoro is the first screener, if you just think of them as screeners. Okoro is the first screener, and then Strus is the second screener, right? If Okoro has the ball and hands it off to Ty Jerome, and then Max Strus sets a ball screen after, that's a Miami action, right? If you flip it, where Okoro sets a screen and then Strus hands it off, like happens here, it's Chicago. But there are those who use the catch-all of zoom, and for me, it's easier to just call it a zoom, just because it's like if we have different terminology, but a zoom is something where it's like there's a screen and handoff happening, and whatever order it happens in doesn't really matter. Cool, just call it a zoom. So that's why I generally use zoom as like it's more a catch-all for me. So Chicago is that. Miami is handoff into ball screen. Chicago is ball screen or down screen into a handoff. But zoom is the everything.
We got a square rectangle situation going on.
Yeah.
I see. So
like I said, not that important.
No, I've kind of gone back and forth when I learned what Chicago was, a pin down into a handoff. And then I also saw similar sets of like Miami, or I even saw it called Orlando, where like you described it as, basically reverse order. So definitely much easier to just refer to the essentially similar things being done as a zoom. And so where does the delay come in here?
So the delay is just that first pass, the hit to the trail man. A delay is normally a ball reversal where it swings. So in this situation, it happens very briefly at the beginning of this clip, but the delay is just hitting, for me, it's hitting the trailer. So when Garland hits Strus here, that's all that you need for it to be called delay for me. It's just a way for me to, or excuse me, that's not Max Strus, that's Georges Niang. Yeah. So,
a lot of players, you're good.
Yeah. So,
Going through a lot of
the simple swing, and then the action happens that way. That's all I need to call it delay. In theory, you wouldn't, for me, like for naming purposes. Yeah, I'm only saying it because that's a way for me to describe the alignment as like a 5 out with the big up top kind of, the big was inbounding the ball, and now the big is at the top of the key, and he's receiving that swing pass, right? So
Yeah,
that's
and I only ask because I almost think of like semi transition where you're in between transition, but maybe just the defense is now set, but it's not completely set, and everyone's still coming down the floor a little bit. So it could also, be thought of as semi transition. I wouldn't have even thought of just a simple passing back to the trail man as its own term that is actually collected in the full play call, or at least the way to call it that after the fact of how you would describe the full set. So, that's good to know. That's where delay comes in, and then zoom is the catch-all for the pin down handoff combinations, and then the skip pass to Mobley here. And like we saw in the play before, you described it beautifully, where he all in one motion makes the catch and delivers a little lateral shuttle pass here right to Garland on the move. Doesn't have to stop at all. Sets a little screen, and then the moment Garland kind of draws both of the defenders, he's going to dump off right back to Mobley, where it's not an easy shot, but it is a little more open, has a little advantage. He's on the move now. Pretty tough contested shot over that arm, but converts it. So a beautiful breakdown, really nitty gritty, and I'm happy we're digging into some of these concepts. I've definitely learned a few more today, and it's going to be hard to forget Gaggle. So that's one that
right.
sticks with you. But I appreciate you kind of hopping on and really digging deep into all these plays, and definitely enjoy talking about some of our favorite players. I mean, it's always fun to just think about the greats and the legends that help build this game, help bring us to basketball, and so many fans that just love the sport because of great players who are able to build on all these individual skills to become the tough shot making stars they're remembered as.
Yeah, and I mean, the key aspect to all of this is I never want there to be a reason why you can't get into basketball breakdowns or analysis or anything like that if you're on the outside looking in. So that's why I want to make, I mean, Bowser to Bowser is the driving force behind it, but I generally I independently before we started sort of working together on that, and like I said, the basketball action dictionary is like 99.9% Bowser to Bowser, and he occasionally asks me questions, but I love the concept behind it of let's make it accessible to everybody. Let's make it easy for people to get into basketball and study basketball. And then for the YouTube stuff, it's the same thing of I want you to be able to enjoy a player, watch a player, and I want you to be able to see what I see. But you don't necessarily have to enjoy what I enjoy or break it down to the granular level of like progressions of moves or progressions of skills. You can watch the whole video and enjoy it to enjoy it. You can watch the video to study it. Like however you consume basketball, you're welcome to consume basketball, and you there shouldn't be any sort of like, hey, no, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing. That's what's frustrating to me. And the very cool thing about it is by making these videos, I've um some of the subjects I've made the videos about have reached out to me, and they like that's very cool. And some of the younger ones have even told me it's like, hey, I've been watching your channel for a while. I'm so like not honored to make it, but like that's kind of what they're saying. And I know some of that is like, okay, man, like you're in the NBA. I'm like a guy making videos, but still very cool, right? Anytime anybody reaches out to me about the videos, the YouTube, the breakdowns, it's always very cool. And basketball is a conversation, and I love having it. So
Hey man, I mean that's what makes basketball such a fun game. I think like we were saying earlier, like you can enjoy it at any level. You can enjoy it for entertainment. You can enjoy it for the process, the coaching, the scouting, the fundamentals, the learning, and that's what we're here to do. Make learning basketball fun, and bring more fans for the right reason. Of you can enjoy the game just for the highlights and watching the tough shots, and you can enjoy all the way down to the little pivot moves and the fundamental footwork, and maybe pick up a thing or two as a player trying to learn. So that's just what makes it cool. So, check out Ev's work on YouTube, on Twitter, Evin Gualberto. I think it's the same @ for both. appreciate you taking the time today to talk some hoops, man.
Absolutely. And I mean, the one of the reasons I reached out to you specifically is this, like having conversations and having as great of the conversations as you've been having. It's very cool. And I love the idea behind it. And I was happy to be a guest on.
Hey, man, I really appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you. Enjoyed your work for a long time, and we'll have to do it again next time we find some plays to dig into down anytime. We'll make it happen.
Yes,
But
sir.
thanks for everything. You know it. Have a good one.
With Ryan.
Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.